Seeing none, the yeas are 34, the nays are 65. The amendment is not agreed to. Majority Leader.
A few minutes ago, Senator Carl Levin cast his 12,000th vote. So it's my honor to say a few words about Carl Levin. He served the state of Michigan for 35 years, longest-serving senator in the history of that state. And during his 35 years in the Senate, he has been known as a workhorse. If you have a problem, you want somebody to look it over and understand the issue, go to Senator Levin. He is somebody that really is a person who dots all the I's and crosses all the T's. I depend and have depended on him so much for issues that are difficult. He's a native of Detroit, he attended Swarthmore College. He graduated, as I always remind him, Harvard Law School. I told him several times that obviously my application was lost because I never heard back from him. He served as general counsel to the Michigan Civil Rights Commission, assistant attorney general for the state of Michigan. He ran for the Detroit City Council, served 2 terms there, and was elected to the United States Senate in 1978, where he served 6 terms as really an effective champion of the people of Michigan. Public service runs in his family. Sander Levin, is his older brother, who came to the House of Representatives in 1982 with me, Durbin, Carper, Boxer, to name just a few. And, Mr. President, Senator Levin has heard me say this several times, and I'll continue to say it because it's one of the most impressive, memorable statements I've ever had in a very personal setting. I was in the House of Representatives, and I was thinking of running for the Senate. And I went over to meet with Carl Levin to get his ideas and to meet him. And I said, as I was trying to establish some rapport with him, I said, I'm serving with your brother. He and I came here together Congress ago. And without hesitation and so sincerely looked up at me and he said, yes, he's my brother, but he's also my best friend. I've never, ever forgotten that. That speaks so well of the Levin family. Sandy has been the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, is now the ranking member of the Ways and Means Committee, of which Carl is very proud of the service of his brother, as is Sandy proud of the service of his brother. Carl Levin has been the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, which of course is one of the most important, powerful committees in the entire Congress. But he is a respected voice on issues dealing with national security. And he has done so much to improve the status of men and women in the military for our great country. He is the first person to introduce a bill. In fact, the very first bill he introduced as a senator speaks of the kind of person he is and the issues he cares about. He introduced a bill to end discrimination by credit card companies. Now, Mr. President, we have, and 2 Congresses ago when we did some real good reforming of the credit card debate, Senator Levin, of course, involved in that, as well he should have been, because he was the first to bring it to the attention of the American people, things that needed to be done. He's also the chairman of the Permanent Select Committee on Investigations, which does and has done for decades great work for this country. But under his guidance and leadership, it has done some remarkably good work. He was one who delved in very deeply into the Enron collapse. Again, that committee has done a lot of work on abusive credit card practices. Credit card practices is one of the main reasons we were able to get credit card reform done. He led investigation of the 2008 financial crisis. He's looked very closely and issued a wonderful report on what I refer to as tax loopholes, and I think that's what he refers to them also. He's been one of the country's leading experts, and certainly one of the leading experts in this body, for American manufacturers. We know that manufacturing had such strong forces in Michigan in years past, and they're coming back as a result of the work that the Michigan delegation has done, led by Senator Levin. He is someone who understands that we have a new world, we have global markets, and we have to continue working hard to make sure that we're part of that, and we are. Great Lakes, he's fought to protect the Great Lakes, Michigan's signature natural resource. He's married to Barbara, a wonderful woman who has been so thoughtful and kind to me, but especially my wife during her recent illness. They've been together, married since 1961. They have 3 daughters, 6 grandchildren. Carl Levin is somebody that I so admire. He's got a lot of service left in him, Mr. President. There are so many things that he is capable of doing as a result of the positions he now holds in the Senate. But the one thing that I've admired so many things about Carl Levin, but the one thing, as I've already indicated, is how strongly he feels about his family. He and his brother have a piece of property in Michigan. They call it the Tree Farm. And I still have, in Searchlight, my hat that they gave me that says Tree Farm. And he has talked to me on many occasions. We haven't talked lately at how he and his brother just like to walk on their tree farm. There's nothing there except trees. But it's an occasion for them to be together as brothers. So congratulations to Senator Carl Levin on reaching this impressive milestone. Impressive, of course, 12,000 votes. But not only has he left that mark, but he's left a mark in my mind and anyone that served with him as an extraordinary man.
Mr. President.
The Republican leader.
It's been my honor to observe the senior senator from Michigan for almost 3 decades now. And I, too, want to rise and congratulate him on achieving this milestone. There's no member of the Senate who is brighter, more hardworking. And we've had a good example here in the last couple of months of Senator Levin's respect for the institution and his desire to protect the traditions of this institution, which I want him to know that is widely respected all throughout the Senate, and particularly on this side of the aisle. So I congratulate him for this important achievement and look forward to working with him in the future.
Mr. President.
The senator from Michigan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise, too, to congratulate my friend and my colleague, the senior senator from Michigan. This is the day he has cast his 12,000th vote. But what is most significant is not the quantity of his votes, but the quality of his votes. And the fact that each one of those has had Michigan's face on it when he cast those votes. And so, as our majority leader indicated, our leader, Senator Levin, has been a champion for the automotive industry, for manufacturing, for his beloved Detroit, for our beautiful and wonderful Great Lakes, for the Department of Defense, and more particularly the men and women who serve us every day. And I just want to rise on behalf of everyone in Michigan to say how proud we are of Senator Levin. We have great confidence in his judgment, integrity, and hard work. And in my book, there's nobody better. And of course, I am very, very thrilled with the wonderful family that he has, he and Barbara, and he's ahead of me on grandchildren, but I'm working on it. And but he is not only someone with the right ethics and integrity and love for his family, but he has fought hard. Nobody fights harder and does the right thing for Michigan more than Carl Levin, and so I just want to join in congratulating him and once again say it's not about the number of votes, it's the quality of votes. And every one of those 12,000 votes has had Michigan's name on it. Thank you.
Mr. President.
The senator from Michigan.
Mr. President, first let me thank my dear colleague, my partner from Michigan, Senator Stabenow. We work so closely on Michigan issues. We work together on them, and she's just one great partner, and how proud I am to represent Michigan with her at my side and her as a partner. Talking about partners, my wife Barbara now has been married to me for 51 years, and she is my lifelong, she is my, I got to straighten this thing out. My brother is my lifelong best buddy because he was there when I was born, so I have to modify what Senator Reid said. But for the last 51 years, my wife has been my best buddy, and my brother has been my second best buddy. So, I'm blessed with family. Thank you all for mentioning family. I'm blessed with staff led by David Lyles. I have great friendships here in this body, and there's just no substitute for the kind of friendships and relationships which make this body work. Even when it doesn't appear to be working, it's working, and I know the public gets frustrated with us at times, but this is an extraordinarily resilient body. We've come back many times during the 34 years I've been here from some periods when we've been frustrated in terms of getting our work done. But we pull through, and this wonderful, noble institution, this venerable institution is being protected here by people who love it. And I cherish those relationships with those people who really do cherish this body and what it stands for uniquely in the world. There is no other body like it in the world, and I only wish that people like Robert Byrd and Danny Inouye could live forever to help protect this body, but that's not the case. So I just want to mention one other thing, and I am very grateful to Senator Reid and Senator McConnell for their comments, and I want to just say one thing about something that Senator McConnell made reference to. A few weeks ago, this body did something which was very, very bipartisan and very essential to its health and its survival, and that was to make sure that we continue to protect the minority, but not to overprotect a few members if those members take excessive advantage of our rules. And so 8 of us got together. Senator McCain and I pulled together 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, and we, for many, many weeks, worked together without staff and came up with an alternative which the leaders used to work through this complicated situation that we found ourselves in relative to the rules. On the Democratic side, we had Senator Schumer, Senator Cardin, and Senator Pryor joining with us. On the Republican side, we had Senator Alexander and Senator Kyle and Senator Barrasso joining Senator McCain and I. And it was really I believe, one of the most important things that we've done in recent years here, which is to, number one, change the procedures. They weren't working. They were being used to frustrate efforts to get legislation to the floor. We had to do that. We had to do something to change the rules which were being misused in terms of post-cloture hours on judges that were going to be approved by votes of 95 to 1 or 2, and those post-cloture hours were being used to stall the Senate. And we took care of that situation. We acted on a bipartisan basis. And hopefully that spirit of bipartisanship, which is so essential to making this place work, will continue. We'll be given a boost not just in what the leaders did in accepting our recommendations essentially on these procedural changes, but we'll now apply and work with other efforts that are underway and will be underway in this Congress. I want to mention that because 8 of us on a bipartisan basis did something which we believe very deeply about as a way of avoiding what was called the nuclear option, which would have then led the Senate, if that were used, to changing the rules in a way which was not provided for in the rules, this being a continuing body under our rules, to have gone around them and to essentially put a presiding officer in the position of ignoring the advice of our parliamentarian and saying that we could, by majority vote, do something which our rules say can only be done by two-thirds of us, would have done severe damage, long-lasting damage to this institution. We were able to avoid it. Democrats and Republicans, well beyond the 8 of us, including the presiding officer who was so helpful to me in working through this idea, giving me suggestions, and I'm very grateful to him for the kind of suggestions and conversations that we had. We were able to work through an issue on a bipartisan basis, and then the body came together, and about 80 of us or more then voted for these procedural changes. And I thought it was a great day personally. I know that. I know that the 8 of us feel very strongly what an important contribution we made to this body working together. So we feel very good about it. I hope over time that some of the people who were critical of it will see it as being a significant advance in making this body work better, allowing us to work our will. But I just wanted to mention that because it was mentioned by one of our leaders, Senator McConnell, and I know that Senator Reid worked so closely, and his staff really helped us through a very, very difficult situation, which could have, if not resolved on a bipartisan basis, have created some real problems for the ongoing operations of this body. So I just want to thank our leaders, thank Senator Reid, of course, who is such a dear, dear friend, and I thank him for mentioning not just my beloved wife, Barbara, but also my wonderful brother, Sandy, and I then yield the floor.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
Mr. President.
The senator from North Dakota.
I ask that the quorum call be suspended.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to speak on the Keystone XL pipeline project. Gas prices are now about $3.50, actually $3.53 a gallon, which is up over 90% since President Obama took office. Economic activity for the fourth quarter of 2012 declined by 0.1%. It was projected to go up by about 1 to 1.2%. Actually, it declined by 0.1%. Still, the President refuses to approve a multi-billion-dollar project, the Keystone XL pipeline, that will provide energy, create jobs, generate tax revenue, and help reduce our dependence on oil from the Middle East. And he's still delaying, even though every state on the pipeline route has consented to the project. So every single state on the route has approved the project and will have better environmental stewardship with the project than without it. So let me repeat that. Every state on the route has approved the project and will have better environmental stewardship with the project than without it, yet the President continues to delay. So let me elaborate. Recently, a group of 53 senators, both Republican and Democrat, signed a letter that I helped organize to President Obama asking him to approve without delay the Keystone XL pipeline project. The letter was signed by a majority of the U.S. Senate within just one day of Nebraska Governor Dave Heinemann's approval of a new route through his state of Nebraska. The new path addressed Nebraska's concerns about the route, as well as the President's, by circumventing the environmentally sensitive Sandhills region, effectively removing the last obstacle to approval. Prior to sending this letter, Senator Max Baucus and myself in November organized a similar letter, that was in November, signed by 9 Republican senators and 9 Democrat senators, asking to meet with the President to discuss the many benefits that accrue to our nation by building the Keystone XL pipeline. Now let me read that letter. It's very short. With the elections of 2012 behind us, we write to remind you of the continuing importance of the Keystone XL pipeline. We want to work together to keep creating jobs, and the Keystone XL is a vital piece of the puzzle. We would like to meet with you in the near future to discuss this important project. Setting politics aside, nothing has changed about the thousands of jobs that Keystone XL will create. Nothing has changed about the energy security to be gained through an important addition to the existing pipeline network built with sound environmental stewardship and the best modern technology. Nothing has changed about the security to be gained from using more fuel produced at home and by a close and stable ally. And nothing has changed about the need for America to remain a place where businesses still build things. We hope that you will follow through on your directive of March 22nd, 2012, to federal agencies to move forward vital energy infrastructure like Keystone XL. The state of Nebraska is nearing completion of the new pipeline route within Nebraska. With that process near completion, we look forward to an affirmative determination of national interest soon. Now, that letter we sent to the President in November, bipartisan letter, 9 Republican senators, 9 Democrat senators. To date, we've received no direct response from the White House, despite that there's clearly strong bipartisan support for the project. The only response we received was not from the White House, but rather from the State Department. And let me read that letter. It's very short, too. From David S. Adams, Assistant Secretary of Legislative Affairs at the United States Department of State. It says basically, thank you for your November 16 letter to President Obama concerning the status of the administration's review of TransCanada's new application for a presidential permit for the proposed Keystone XL pipeline project. We've been asked to respond on behalf of the President. The letter then kind of goes through, yeah, we recognize it's an important project, we're looking at it, we're doing some more draft supplemental reviews, and we hope that this information is helpful to you. And please do not hesitate to contact us if we can be of further assistance. So that's the extent of the response. So it's now been more than 4.5 years since the permit applications were submitted to the State Department for this vital energy project. Yet even with an exhaustive review process, the consent now of every state along the route, the backing of a majority of Congress, and the support of the American people, the Keystone XL pipeline project is still languishing at the hands of the President of the United States after 4.5 years. Let me expand on the point about all of the states on the route approving the project. After Governor Heineman, on behalf of the state of Nebraska, sent a letter to the President approving the project, which happened just several weeks ago, after I worked with Senator Baucus and others to get 53 senators in one day on a letter saying to the President, okay, let's get this approved, the governors along the route also sent a letter to the President saying, hey, let's approve the project. So now you've got every single state saying, hey, every single state on the route saying, hey, fine, let's do the project, every single one. Here's the letter. It also includes the Honorable Brad Wall, the Premier of Saskatchewan. The pipeline passes through Saskatchewan as well. And I'm not going to read the whole letter, but just a few excerpts. Dear Mr. President, as you begin your second term, we are writing to respectfully urge you to move forward on the Keystone XL pipeline project. The energy relationship between the United States and Canada is vital to the future of both our countries. It's an interest we share, transcending political lines and geographic boundaries. The letter goes on and talks about how the project is crucial to U.S. energy security, working with Canada for our energy rather than getting it from the Middle East. The letter talks about thousands of jobs that the project creates, not only building this $7 billion pipeline, but then all the jobs that go to the refineries and the other activities that go with it. And it talks about safety, efficiency, and reliability. Then the letter concludes, Mr. President, we consider the Keystone XL pipeline fundamentally important to the future economic prosperity of both the United States and Canada. We strongly urge you to issue a presidential permit and act swiftly to approve the Keystone XL pipeline. Signed by governors. Now remember, Senator Baucus and I have been working on the effort on behalf of Montana. You've got Nebraska here. Governor Heineman just sent a letter in. Now, here are some of the other governors on this letter. Sam Brownback from Kansas. Governor Jack Dalrymple, North Dakota. Governor Denny Daugaard from South Dakota. Governor Mary Fallin from Oklahoma. Governor Rick Perry from Texas, in addition to other governors that aren't on the route, like Governor Butch Otter of Idaho, Governor Sandoval of Nevada, Governor Meade of Wyoming, Governor Jan Brewer of Arizona, Republicans and Democrats. But the point is, the whole route, all the governors have written in and said, hey, let's do this. Let's do it. So what's going on here? Why does the President continue to delay the project? The long wait for approval is dismaying enough, but it represents a larger issue for our nation and begs a bigger question for policyholders. How will America ever build an all-of-the-above energy policy if the President takes nearly 5 years to approve one piece of an inclusive plan? Particularly, as I say, after everybody on the route has said, hey, can we do this after 5 years, please? Can we move forward, Mr. President? To recount briefly, this $7 billion, 1,700-mile high-tech pipeline will carry oil not only from Alberta, Canada, to refineries in Oklahoma and the Texas Gulf Coast, but it will also carry growing quantities of U.S. sweet crude from the Bakken oil fields in North Dakota and Montana. Even by modest estimates, it will create tens of thousands of jobs, boost the American economy, and raise much-needed revenues for state and federal government. We have a deficit. Here's a project to get substantial tax revenue without raising taxes, through economic activity, through job creation. Further, and perhaps most importantly, it will help put our country within striking range of a long-sought goal, true energy security. For the first time in generations, the United States, with its friend and ally Canada, will have the capacity to produce more energy than we use, reducing or eliminating our reliance on the Middle East and other volatile parts of the world. The argument has been advanced that the oil sands will increase carbon emissions and that failing to build the Keystone XL will somehow reduce emissions. But let's look at that claim. That's the other piece. Let's look at the environmental aspects of this project. Today, more than 80% of all new recovery in the oil sands is being accomplished in situ, a technology that makes oil sands' carbon footprint comparable to conventional drilling. In fact, the oil sands industry has reduced greenhouse gas emissions per barrel of oil produced by an average of 26% since 1990, with some facilities achieving reductions as high as 50%. Today, heavy crude oil from the Middle East and even from California produces more carbon emissions over its life cycle than the Canadian oil sands. Let me repeat that. Today, heavy crude that we import from the Middle East and even some of the California heavy crudes produce more carbon emissions over their life cycle than Canadian oil sand oil. We also need to factor in that if the pipeline is not built from Alberta to the United States, a similar pipeline will be built to Canada's Pacific coast. That's what I show right here on this chart. From there, the oil will be shipped across the Pacific Ocean, a much larger, sensitive ecosystem than the sand hills, which we're not even going through now, to be refined at facilities in China with weaker environmental standards and more emissions than facilities in the United States. The U.S., moreover, will continue to import oil from the Middle East, again on tankers, factor in the cost of trucking and railing the product to market overland, and the result, contrary to the claims of opponents, will be more emissions and a less secure distribution system without the Keystone XL pipeline project. Think about it. So we say, okay, we're not going to have this pipeline, even though we've built other pipelines already. We're not going to get oil from Canada. What happens? That oil goes to China, higher emissions. You're going to take it across the ocean, which is greater risk than putting it in a pipeline. You're going to have it refined in refineries in China, which have much worse emission standards than our own. And guess what we get to do? See, we don't get the jobs. We don't get the tax revenues. You know what we do get to do? We get to continue to import our oil from the Middle East. How does that sound? Is that a good idea with what's going on in Iran and with what's going on in Egypt and with what's going on in Syria? The risk that the Strait of Hormuz could be blockaded or that you could have further conflict over there that cut off oil supplies? Do we really? Is that what the American people want? They want to continue to get oil from the Middle East rather than our closest friend and ally, Canada? The American people would rather that oil goes to Canada? Of course not. And that's what we're talking about with this project. Well, that raises another important point. The administration's own State Department completed its 3-year National Environmental Protection Act, NEPA Act, review of the Keystone XL project back in 2011 and determined that there would be no significant impacts on the environment. That's what the administration determined in their own NEPA process. And that raises the other point. The White House says, well, we don't want to get ahead of the process. But the President effectively abandoned the process more than a year ago when he halted the project by executive action. Had he not, the State Department, in keeping with the usual process, would have issued a decision on the permit after 4 years by December 2011, according to a letter Secretary Clinton sent to me in August 2011. I've worked toward approval of the Keystone XL pipeline, first as governor of North Dakota and now as a U.S. Senator, because I believe it is just the kind of project that will grow our economy and create the jobs our country so desperately needs, and it will do so with good environmental stewardship. At the same time, it will reduce our dependence on the Middle East for oil, which is what the American people have desired for decades. The Keystone XL pipeline project is long overdue. For the benefit of our economy, our environment, and our long-term energy security, President Obama needs to approve it now, without further delay. Mr. President, I would ask unanimous consent for just several minutes on another topic in regard to a recipient of the Medal of Honor from my state of North Dakota.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I rise today to honor one of our nation's true heroes, Army Staff Sergeant Clinton Romesha. On Monday, the President will present Sergeant Romesha with our country's highest military award, the Medal of Honor, for, quote, acts of gallantry above and beyond the call of duty, end quote. Clint comes from a long line of military heroes. His father is a veteran of the Vietnam War. His grandfather fought in the U.S. Army during World War II. Romesha often cites his grandfather as his greatest hero, so it wasn't surprising that Clint followed his example and joined the Army in 1999. Staff Sergeant Romesha showed courage every day that he donned his Army uniform, but especially on October 3, 2009, one of the deadliest days of the war in Afghanistan. On that day, hundreds of Taliban fighters ambushed American combat outpost Keating from all sides with grenades, machine guns, mortars, and rifles. Heavily outnumbered, Clint Romesha and his fellow soldiers quickly fought back in what would turn out to be a deadly day-long battle. Sergeant Romesha fought valiantly. He darted into danger to draw out the enemy many times. He himself took out a machine gun team. Staff Sergeant Romesha was working to take out a second when he was wounded by shrapnel from an exploding grenade. His Medal of Honor citation reads, quote, undeterred by his injuries, Staff Sergeant Romesha continued to fight, and upon the arrival of another soldier to aid him and the assistant gunner, he again rushed through the exposed avenue to assemble additional soldiers. With complete disregard for his own safety, he continually exposed himself to heavy enemy fire as he moved confidently about the battlefield, engaging and destroying multiple enemy targets, end quote, as the citation states. Staff Sergeant Romesha exemplified the valor that President Theodore Roosevelt, also a Medal of Honor recipient, spoke of when he said, quote, courage is not having the strength to go on, it is going on when you don't have the strength, end quote. Despite his wounds, Sergeant Romesha never stopped fighting. He stayed in the battle, leading his team, directing air support, protecting wounded soldiers, and helping to recover the bodies of his fallen friends. The battle lasted for 12 hours. 8 soldiers lost their lives and 22 were wounded, a fact that Romesha humbly reminds us of whenever his bravery is touted. In fact, Sergeant Romesha said, quote, what I got injured with was nothing. I have buddies who lost their eyesight, who lost limbs. For that, I would rather give them all the credit they deserve for the sacrifices they made. For me, it was nothing, end quote. To Sergeant Romesha, it was just doing his job. To the rest of us, he's a true example of courage and selfless sacrifice. He went above and beyond the call of duty, repeatedly risking his life to defend his post and, more importantly, to help his fellow soldiers. We are grateful for his service and for his example to us all. Today, Clint resides in Minot, North Dakota, where he and his wife, Tamara, are raising their 3 children. I'm certain that he is every much the hero and inspiration to them that his own grandfather was to him. My wife, Mikey, and I join our fellow North Dakotans and Americans in honoring Sergeant Romesha for his heroic and selfless service. We thank him for his exemplary actions on that dangerous day in Afghanistan and every day that he served our great country. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.